6 kills. That's how many enemy soldiers an 18-year-old Navy corpsman killed while holding a plasma bottle above a dying officer, one eye blown out by shrapnel, Japanese soldiers charging his position from every direction. Not 6 assists, not 6 suppressions, 6 confirmed kills with a pistol and a carbine in his offhand because his other hand was busy keeping his patient alive. Between 1941 and 1945, millions of American teenagers went to war. Most did their duty and came home. Some never came home at all. But a handful of them did something else entirely. They became killing machines. They stacked body counts that made hardened veterans pause. They destroyed enemy positions so efficiently that their citations read like fiction. Today, we're ranking the 5 most lethal American teen soldiers of World War II. Not the bravest, not the most decorated, the most lethal. Number 5 protected a life by taking 6. Number 3 killed 50 enemy soldiers in a single afternoon. Number 2 destroyed 75 Japanese soldiers in 30 minutes flat. And number 1 killed more enemy combatants than some entire platoons did during the whole war. This isn't Hollywood. This isn't legend. These are verified combat statistics, official Medal of Honor citations, and documented enemy casualties caused by teenagers who weren't old enough to vote, but were old enough to change the outcome of battles. Before we start, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into history's most remarkable warriors. Now, let's count them down. Number 5. Hospital Apprentice First Class Robert Eugene Bush. Here's what most people don't understand about Navy corpsmen. They're supposed to save lives, not take them. They carry medical supplies, not assault rifles. Their job is to patch holes, not make them. Robert Bush apparently never got that memo. May 2nd, 1945. Okinawa. The battle had been raging for over a month. The Marines called it the Typhoon of Steel, and that name wasn't poetry. It was an understatement. Bush was 18 years old, a hospital corpsman attached to a Marine rifle company, and he'd been running between casualties all day. Artillery, mortar, machine gun fire from entrenched Japanese positions. Every time a Marine went down, Bush went to him. No hesitation, no waiting for the shooting to stop. Just move. Then his platoon commander, Lieutenant James Roach, took a hit on a ridge. Exposed position. Skyline. The worst possible place to be wounded. Bush didn't care. He grabbed a Marine to cover him from the front and another to cover him from behind. Both of those Marines were dead by the time Bush reached the lieutenant. Now picture this. You're 18 years old. You've just watched 2 men die protecting you. Your officer is bleeding out in front of you, and the only thing between him and death is a bag of plasma in your steady hands. So you start the transfusion. You hold the plasma bottle high in one hand, gravity feeding the blood into his veins. That's when the Japanese counterattacked. Bush had a choice: drop the plasma and fight, or let his patient die. He chose neither. He kept the plasma bottle raised with his right hand and drew the lieutenant's pistol with his left. Then he started shooting. A grenade landed near them. The blast drove shrapnel into Bush's body. He kept shooting. A second grenade exploded. More shrapnel, this time into his left arm and his right eye. His eye was gone. He could feel the blood running down his face. The plasma bottle never wavered. When his pistol ran empty, Bush grabbed a discarded carbine with his wounded arm and kept firing at the Japanese soldiers charging up the hill. 6 enemy soldiers died trying to reach that position. 6 men killed by a one-eyed 18-year-old corpsman who refused to let go of a plasma bottle because his patient needed him. When the attack was finally repelled, Bush refused medical treatment for himself. He wouldn't leave until Lieutenant Roach was evacuated. Then he tried to walk to the aid station under his own power. He collapsed halfway there. President Harry Truman personally presented Robert Bush with the Medal of Honor on October 5, 1945. Bush was the youngest member of the United States Navy to receive the nation's highest military decoration during World War II. He was 18 years old. Here's the statistic that defines Robert Bush: 6 enemy soldiers killed. It's not the highest number on this list, not even close. But no other soldier on this list killed anyone while simultaneously keeping another person alive. That's not just lethality. That's lethality with one hand tied behind your back. Literally. Bush survived his wounds, married his high school sweetheart, built a successful lumber business, and lived to age 79. The Robert E. Bush Naval Hospital in 29 Palms, California, is named in his honor. So is a street in his hometown of South Bend, Washington. But the detail that matters most? When asked about his Medal of Honor decades later, Bush said he wasn't the real hero. The real heroes, he said, were the ones who gave everything. He saw himself as just a custodian for those who died. That's Robert Bush, a teenager who killed 6 enemy soldiers while saving a man's life, lost an eye doing it, and still thought he didn't deserve the credit. Number 4. Private First Class Mike Colalillo, April 7, 1945, Untergriesheim, Germany. The war in Europe had less than a month left, but nobody in Mike Colalillo's unit knew that yet. What they knew was that they were pinned down. German artillery, mortar fire, machine guns from fortified positions. The kind of crossfire that makes men dig into the dirt and pray. Colalillo was 19 years old, a private from Duluth, Minnesota. He'd grown up poor, the son of Italian immigrants, the 8th of 9 children. His mother died when he was 16, and he dropped out of high school to work at a bakery to help support his family. When the Army drafted him in 1944, he was still just a kid from a tough neighborhood on the west side of Duluth. Now he was in Germany, face down in the dirt, watching his friends die. Here's what Mike Colalillo did next. He stood up. In the middle of incoming artillery fire, incoming mortar rounds, incoming machine gun fire, he stood up. Then he started shouting, "Follow me! Get up! Attack!" And they did. His entire company watched this 19-year-old kid rise from cover in the middle of hell, and they followed him. Colalillo ran forward in the wake of an American tank, firing his submachine gun at the German positions. His weapon was struck by shrapnel and knocked from his hands. Most soldiers would have dropped back. Colalillo climbed onto the tank. Think about what that means. The only thing protecting that tank from enemy fire was its armor. Anything on top of the tank was exposed completely, totally, to every German gunner who could draw a bead on him. Colalillo climbed up anyway, asked the tank crew for permission to use the turret-mounted machine gun, and opened fire. Bullets clanging off the armor around him, shrapnel flying, German machine gunners trying to cut him down. Colalillo ignored all of it. He fired at the German emplacements with what his Medal of Honor citation called devastating accuracy. First one machine gun nest destroyed, then another, then another. He killed or wounded at least 10 Germans from that position alone. The tank kept moving forward. Colalillo stayed on top, completely exposed, raining fire on the German defenses. He blasted 3 more positions, destroyed another machine gun emplacement, silenced all resistance in his sector. At least 3 more Germans killed, an undetermined number wounded. Then his machine gun jammed. A normal person would climb, down, find cover. Maybe call it a day after what he'd already done. Colalillo grabbed a submachine gun from the tank crew, jumped off the tank, and continued his attack on foot. The order to withdraw came shortly after. The American tanks had exhausted their ammunition, but Colalillo noticed one of his comrades lying wounded in the open. Several hundred yards of exposed terrain separated them from the American lines. Enemy artillery and mortar fire was pulverizing that ground. Colalillo went back for him anyway. He carried the wounded soldier across that open terrain while German shells exploded around them. Final tally: 25 German soldiers killed or wounded, 4 machine gun positions destroyed, 1 company inspired to attack through overwhelming fire, 1 wounded comrade carried to safety under direct enemy bombardment. Mike Colalillo received the Medal of Honor from President Truman on December 18, 1945, in a ceremony in the Oval Office. His friends back in Duluth had a question when they heard the news. How could a little twerp like you get the Medal of Honor? He was 5'4". He weighed maybe 130 pounds, and he had just inflicted more casualties in a single afternoon than some soldiers did in entire campaigns. Colalillo returned to Duluth after the war. He worked at a steel company. He raised 3 children. He never talked much about what happened in Germany. When people asked him about the medal, he'd just shrug. It was a rough time, he'd say. I was scared. He died on December 30th, 2011, at age 86. He was Minnesota's last living Medal of Honor recipient. Number 3, Private First Class Arthur J. Jackson. September 18th, 1944, Peleliu. The Marines had expected to take this island in a few days. They were wrong. The Japanese had dug into the coral rock, creating a honeycomb of fortified positions that could survive naval bombardment and resist direct assault. What was supposed to be a quick operation turned into 2 months of some of the bloodiest fighting in the Pacific. Arthur Jackson was 19 years old, a Marine from Portland, Oregon. On this particular day, his platoon was pinned down on the southern end of the island. Japanese pillboxes had them locked in place. Machine gun fire swept the ground. Anyone who moved died. Jackson's commanding officer needed someone to do something about those pillboxes. He asked Jackson if he thought he could make it to a shallow trench that connected some of the enemy bunkers. Jackson said he'd try. What happened next takes about 90 minutes to describe in real time. It took Jackson less than that to complete. He loaded up with grenades and grabbed a Browning automatic rifle. Then he started running. The first pillbox contained approximately 35 Japanese soldiers. 35. In a fortified position specifically designed to withstand infantry assault. Jackson charged it alone. He poured automatic fire into the opening, trapping the soldiers inside. Then he hurled white phosphorus grenades and explosive charges. The entire pillbox went up. All 35 Japanese soldiers inside were killed. Jackson didn't stop. He moved to the next position, destroyed it, then the next, and the next. His Medal of Honor citation describes what followed with clinical precision. He stormed one gun position after another, dealing death and destruction to the savagely fighting enemy in his inexorable drive against the remaining defenses. Inexorable. That's the word. Unstoppable, relentless, inevitable. By the time Jackson collapsed from heat exhaustion, he had destroyed 12 Japanese pillboxes, 12 fortified positions, approximately 50 enemy soldiers killed, credited with 50 dead by one 19-year-old with a bar and a bag of grenades. When Marines from his platoon caught up with him, they found Jackson lying on his back, completely spent, barely conscious. They picked him up, slapped him on the back, cheered him like he'd just scored a winning touchdown, because in a way, he had. His one-man assault had cleared a sector that had pinned down his entire battalion. Marines who would have died taking those positions one by one were alive because Jackson had taken them himself. The Japanese who survived the battle couldn't understand it. To this day, I do not understand why they didn't vacate some of those positions and come out after me," Jackson said years later. "I mean, they must have thought there was more than one person doing all this. There wasn't. Just one teenager from Oregon who decided to run straight at the enemy until there wasn't any enemy left." Arthur Jackson received the Medal of Honor from President Truman on October 5, 1945. He went on to fight at Okinawa, where he was wounded again. He served in Korea and Vietnam. He died on June 14, 2017, at age 92, the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the Battle of Peleliu. The Marines have a term for soldiers like Jackson. They called him a one-man Marine Corps. Number 2, Private First Class Douglas T. Jacobson, February 26, 1945. Iwo Jima, Hill 382. If you know anything about Iwo Jima, you know about the flag raising on Mount Suribachi. What most people don't know is that the flag raising happened on day 4. The battle lasted 36 days. And the worst fighting wasn't at Suribachi. It was at Hill 382, the highest point on the northern part of the island. The Marines called it the meat grinder. Douglas Jacobson was 19 years old, a Marine from Port Washington, New York. 3 days after the famous flag raising, his platoon was trying to advance toward the summit of Hill 382. They weren't getting very far. The Japanese had turned the hill into a fortress. Pillboxes, bunkers, machine gun nests, anti-aircraft, guns turned on ground troops. The entire area was a kill zone. Then the platoon's bazooka man was killed. Jacobson picked up the bazooka. A bazooka is designed to be a two-man weapon. One soldier loads, one soldier fires. Jacobson would be doing both jobs himself, alone, while under fire. What happened next is difficult to comprehend even when you read the official citation. It took approximately 30 minutes. In those 30 minutes, Douglas Jacobson killed approximately 75 Japanese soldiers and destroyed 16 enemy positions. Let me break that down. 75 kills. 30 minutes. That's roughly 2.5 enemy soldiers killed per minute for half an hour straight. And here's what makes that number almost impossible. A bazooka is a slow weapon. It takes time to load each rocket, time to aim, time to fire. And Jacobson was doing all of it himself, a job designed for 2 men, while Japanese soldiers were actively trying to kill him. First, he destroyed a 20mm anti-aircraft gun and wiped out its crew. Then 2 machine gun positions, then a large blockhouse, then another pillbox, then 7 rifle emplacements, then another cluster of positions, then a Japanese tank that was pouring fire into American lines. The citation describes Jacobson employing his weapon with ready accuracy. But that phrase doesn't capture what was actually happening. This was a 19-year-old kid operating a 2-man weapon by himself, running toward fortified Japanese positions, reloading and firing while bullets flew past his head, doing it over and over again until he ran out of ammunition. 75 enemy soldiers, 16 fortified positions, 1 bazooka, 1 teenager, 30 minutes. When asked about it years later, Jacobson was characteristically modest. He went through officers' candidate school, rose to the rank of major, served in Vietnam flying helicopters. But he never forgot that day on Iwo Jima. At the 40th anniversary of the battle, speaking at a national cemetery, he remembered the brutal fighting, the carnage, the friends who didn't come home. Douglas Jacobson received the Medal of Honor from President Truman on October 5, 1945. He died on August 20, 2000, at age 74. In terms of pure killing efficiency, what Jacobson accomplished that day on Hill 382 remains almost unmatched in infantry combat records. 2.5 kills per minute for 30 consecutive minutes. At age 19, Number 1. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy. Here's the number that matters. 240. That's how many enemy soldiers Audie Murphy is credited with killing during World War II. 240 confirmed kills. More than any other American soldier in the European theater, more than most squads, more than some companies, and he wasn't even supposed to be there. Murphy was born in 1925 in rural Texas, one of 12 children in a sharecropper family so poor that he had to drop out of school after 5th grade to help feed his siblings. When Pearl Harbor happened, he was 16 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed about 110 pounds. He tried to enlist in the Marines. They laughed at him. The Navy rejected him. Even the Army paratroopers said no. So Murphy got his sister to falsify his birth certificate, adding a year to his age, and enlisted in the Army Infantry on June 30th, 1942. He was 17 years old. By the time the war ended, he would hold every combat medal the Army could give, including the Medal of Honor, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and decorations from both France and Belgium. But the moment that defines Audie Murphy happened on January 26, 1945, near a French village called Holtzwihr. Murphy was commanding Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment. He was 19 years old, 6 German tanks and approximately 250 infantry soldiers attacked his position. Murphy's company was already depleted. They'd lost 102 out of 120 men in the preceding days of fighting. Murphy ordered his men to fall back to the woods while he stayed forward to direct artillery fire. Then an American tank destroyer behind him took a direct hit and burst into flames. The crew abandoned the vehicle, leaving Murphy alone at the command post, with German armor rolling toward him. What Murphy did next is almost impossible to believe. He climbed onto the burning tank destroyer. The vehicle was loaded with fuel and ammunition. It could have exploded at any moment. Murphy didn't care. He manned the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on the turret and opened fire. For the next hour, Audie Murphy stood on top of a burning vehicle, exposed to fire from 3 directions, fighting off wave after wave of German infantry while calling in artillery strikes on their positions. German tanks rolled to within 10 yards of him. Infantry tried to rush his position from multiple angles. Murphy killed them all. His Medal of Honor citation states that he killed or wounded approximately 50 German soldiers during that single engagement. 50, in 1 hour, standing on top of a burning tank destroyer that could have blown him to pieces at any second. When asked later why the Germans didn't simply shoot him, Murphy gave the same explanation that Arthur Jackson gave about Peleliu. With all the smoke and fire and noise, they probably didn't even know where the shooting was coming from. They probably thought there was more than one person doing all this. There wasn't. Just one 19-year-old kid from Texas who refused to let his men die. Murphy sustained a leg wound during the fight. He ignored it. When he finally ran out of ammunition, he climbed down from the burning wreck, rejoined his men, and organized a counterattack that drove the Germans back and captured the village of Holtzwihr. Only then did he allow medics to treat his wound. The turret he'd been standing on for an hour exploded minutes after he left it. That's why Audie Murphy is number 1. Not just because of the 240 kills over his entire service, but because on one single day, at one single moment, he demonstrated a level of controlled aggression that turned an impossible situation into a complete victory. He saved his company from annihilation. He killed 50 enemy soldiers, and he did it standing on a bomb. Murphy received the Medal of Honor on June 2, 1945. He went on to become a movie star, appearing in over 40 films, including a 1955 adaptation of his autobiography called To Hell and Back. But the fame never sat right with him. He suffered from what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder, sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow, plagued by nightmares of the men he'd killed and the friends he'd lost. He died in a plane crash on May 28, 1971, at age 45. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery, where his grave is the second most visited site after President John F. Kennedy. The other Medal of Honor recipients at Arlington have their headstones decorated in gold leaf. Murphy asked that his remain plain and inconspicuous. Like an ordinary soldier, he said. But there was nothing ordinary about Audie Murphy. He enlisted as a scrawny teenager who couldn't get any branch of the military to take him seriously. He finished the war as the most decorated American combat soldier in history, credited with killing 240 enemy combatants before his 20th birthday. That's why he's number one. Before we go, let's add up the numbers. Robert Bush, 6 kills. Mike Colalillo, 25 killed or wounded. Arthur Jackson, approximately 50 kills. Douglas Jacobson, approximately 75 kills. Audie Murphy, credited with 240 kills. That's nearly 400 enemy soldiers killed or wounded by 5 teenagers. 400 men who woke up that morning thinking they would win the war, and instead ran into boys who were barely old enough to shave. But here's the real question. Did we get this ranking right? Should Bush be higher for killing while keeping someone alive? Should Jacobson take the top spot for pure efficiency? Drop a comment right now and tell us your ranking. Tell us who we missed, and tell us where you're watching from. Honorable mention goes to Jack Lucas. You've probably heard his name. He was 17 years old on Iwo Jima when he threw himself on 2 grenades to save his fellow Marines. One exploded, one didn't. He survived with over 250 pieces of shrapnel in his body and became the youngest Medal of Honor recipient since the Civil War. But Lucas was about saving lives, not taking them. That's a different kind of hero. If you learned something today, smash that. Like button. It tells YouTube that this is content worth sharing. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into military history. We've got more rankings coming, more forgotten heroes, more stories that deserve to be told. These were teenagers, kids who should have been worrying about school dances and summer jobs. Instead, they stood in the path of history and refused to move. They deserve to be remembered for what they actually did, not the sanitized versions, not the Hollywood rewrites. The truth. If this video gave you a new perspective on these forgotten heroes, do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It takes 2 seconds and it helps us keep telling the stories that history books leave out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.